Lieutenant Emily Carson had always been the quiet one, the invisible thread holding the squadron together without anyone noticing. At the sprawling Air Force base in Nevada, she moved like a shadow among her peers, always on time, always precise, always calculating, but rarely first to be chosen. Her colleagues called her the backup pilot, a label that carried the weight of dismissal more than caution. Emily didn't mind. She had learned early that the world rewarded patience, preparation, and calm under pressure, even if no one recognized it. The sun had barely begun to creep over the horizon that morning, painting the desert sky with strokes of pink and gold, yet Emily was already in the hangar, meticulously inspecting her F-22. Every panel, every lever, every control was examined twice, thrice if necessary. Her hands moved with practiced certainty, almost reverently. She could sense the jet's temperament as if it were alive, its engines tense, its wings hungry for flight. Around her, the other pilots lounged and joked, their cocky laughter echoing against steel walls, oblivious to her diligence. "Hey, Carson," a voice called. It was Captain Riley, the lead pilot in her squadron and the unofficial alpha of the team. "Why are you even here this early? You'll just be the last one in the air anyway." Emily didn't respond, her eyes still scanning the cockpit instruments. Riley snorted, shaking his head. "Seriously, they should rename you the Eternal Backup. That's your destiny." She smiled faintly, not from amusement but from the quiet, simmering determination inside her. She didn't need their validation. Her destiny, she knew, would not be determined by the shallow judgments of those around her. It would be forged in fire when the skis demanded more than bravado and bravura. The squadron chief called the team together for morning briefing, and Emily took her place at the far end of the room, unnoticed. The maps were spread across the table, satellite images of potential targets and air corridors flickering on the screen behind the officer. Mission simulations were discussed, enemy tactics analyzed, probabilities calculated, but Emily's mind wasn't just on what was written on paper. She scanned the room, noting subtle changes in body language, the tiny hesitations in voice and posture, and most importantly, the radar feeds that hinted at irregularities. No one saw her take the extra notes, cross-referencing intelligence reports with historical attack patterns. She didn't mention what she saw. Instead, she tucked it into her mental archive, preparing quietly, methodically, like a chess player studying an opponent 10 moves ahead. By mid-morning, the jets roared to life, filling the air with the scent of burning fuel and the hum of raw power. Emily strapped herself in, her helmet reflecting the blazing Nevada sun. She listened to the chatter in the headset as her colleagues took off one by one, engines screaming, their confidence radiating through every transmission. They didn't even glance her way as she followed, calm, precise, measured. The first formation maneuver was routine, meant to simulate an interception over hostile territory. Emily fell in line, careful not to cut in front of anyone. Her jet sliced through the air, wings vibrating with tension, the desert below a patchwork of orange and brown. The other pilots banked aggressively, showing off their skills, pulling off maneuvers that drew whistles and laughter over the comms. Emily stayed steady, calculating every trajectory, every wind pattern, every possible threat. "Still lagging behind, Carson," Riley barked over the headset, half teasing, half critical. "Come on, keep up." Emily ignored the jab, letting her fingers glide over the controls with deliberate precision. She noticed the anomaly before anyone else did, a faint, fleeting blip on the radar, barely perceptible, moving in a pattern that didn't match the simulation. Her pulse quickened, but outwardly she remained composed. Her voice came through the headset, calm but firm. "Riley, check your 6, she said, and the words hung in the air like a warning. There was a pause, and then Riley cursed under his breath. What the hell? The blip she had seen, an irregularity no one else had noticed, was a ghost moving through the simulated battlefield. Emily's mind raced, cross-referencing enemy attack patterns she had studied endlessly during late nights, poring over maps and simulations when everyone else had gone home. This wasn't a random simulation glitch. Something about the movement felt intentional, calculated, and dangerous. When the squadron regrouped over the Nevada desert, Emily's instincts proved correct. The blip had doubled in speed, breaking formation rules, testing their maneuvers. The other pilots, caught in their bravado, struggled to adjust, their wings clipping dangerously close to one another. Emily's calm, measured approach allowed her to anticipate the blip's moves, positioning herself to counter it, even though it was all still part of the training scenario. By the time the formation touched down, the squadron had been shaken. Riley's face was pale beneath his helmet, sweat glistening. "Where the hell did you learn to do that?" he demanded, voice tight. Emily didn't answer. She simply shut down her jet, the hum of the engines fatting, leaving a ringing silence in her ears. She knew the others still saw her as the backup, the invisible, underestimated pilot always a step behind. But she also knew something they didn't. When the skis turned real, when the danger was no longer simulation but life and death, it wasn't the flashiest or loudest pilot who survived. It was the one who could think, anticipate, and act when everyone else panicked. Back in the hangar, the senior officers were already discussing post-flight debriefing, unaware of the seeds of doubt Emily had planted. Whispers began to circulate among the junior pilots, a mixture of awe and disbelief. "Did you see how she moved?" one muttered. She was ahead of the simulation." Emily cleaned her visor and helmet, her mind racing with scenarios and possibilities. She knew she would be overlooked in the official report. Her actions today would probably be footnotes, if even that. But she didn't care. What mattered was that she had seen the danger first, recognized it, and responded with clarity and precision when no one else could. As the sun dipped lower over the Nevada desert, Emily walked toward the barracks, the wind whipping her hair across her face. Her heart beat in rhythm with the memory of the simulation, the blip on the radar that no one else had noticed. She knew, deep down, that someday she wouldn't be just the backup. Someday, when the stakes were real and the enemy unpredictable, she would be the one everyone called upon when all else failed. But for now she remained unnoticed, the quiet cadet, the shadow in the hangar. Yet a single thought stayed with her as she looked up at the vast, endless sky. Something is coming, and when it arrives, no one will be ready except me. Emily Carson had just finished her evening drills when the alarm blared across the Nevada Air Force Base. It was a piercing, urgent siren that sliced through the quiet desert night. Red lights flashed across the hangar, bouncing off polished jets and steel walls, reflecting a chaos that no one could ignore. Her heart jumped, not in fear, but in the focused anticipation that had been her constant companion for years. This was it. Something had crossed the threshold from theory to reality. Her squadron mates scrambled, their boots clanging against the metal floors. Voices shouted orders and confirmations over the radios. Emily's training kicked in automatically. Strap in, check instruments, run systems diagnostics, her hands moving with the calm precision of someone who had lived through simulations 1,000 times. Around her, the others were panicked, adrenaline coursing through their veins, but Emily's mind was already calculating trajectories, speeds, and potential enemy movements. A voice came over the intercom, trembling slightly with urgency. "All squadrons, immediate scramble. Multiple enemy aircraft detected approaching airspace. Threat level, red. Repeat, threat level, red." Emily's stomach clenched. Enemy aircraft. In U.S. airspace. Her pulse surged, not with panic but with the razor-sharp focus that had defined her entire career. She knew the drill, yet somehow this was different. This wasn't a simulation. Real planes, real danger, real lives. She ran toward her jet, the F-22 waiting for her like a predator coiled and ready to strike. Engines rumbled as pilots climbed into cockpits around her. Emily's squadron mates gave her the usual half-smile, half-smirk, as if to remind her of her place. The backup, the invisible one. But today, Emily wasn't thinking about labels. She was thinking about the radar blips that had already begun to flash threateningly across her screen. Her headset crackled, the calm, confident voice of Captain Riley cutting through the tension. "Carson, you're on standby. Maintain formation until lead confirms engagement. Emily's jaw tightened. Lead, standby, backup. Words that had always stung, always reminded her that no one expected her to matter in the heat of battle. She let the radio chatter flow around her and focused on the mission. Her mind was already mapping out strategies, escape routes, potential maneuvers against a foe she had never seen but instinctively understood could be ruthless. The squadron soared into the sky, jets climbing rapidly into the pink and gold haze of the approaching dawn. The desert below fell away into a patchwork of shadows, mountains, and canyons, and Emily felt the thrill that only flying at supersonic speeds could bring. But this thrill was tempered with tension. The weight of responsibility pressed on her chest. Every instrument, every blip on the radar demanded her attention. Every second mattered. Then a sudden scream of static cut through her headset. Riley's voice, tense, frantic. "Control lost. Control, God damn it, I can't maintain altitude. Someone take over." Emily's stomach dropped. The lead pilot, the one everyone depended on, was in trouble at 30,000 feet. Her hands moved almost without thinking, flipping switches, adjusting thrusters, calibrating control systems. Her mind raced with every emergency protocol she had drilled 1,000 times. She didn't hesitate. She didn't wait. She moved into position beside Riley's faltering jet. "Riley, listen to me," Emily said calmly, though her heart thundered. "Follow my lead, don't fight it, let me guide you." There was a pause, static crackling. Then Riley's voice came back, barely a whisper. "Do it, Carson, please." Emily's training took over. She guided Riley's jet remotely, her own movements precise, calculated, almost like a dance of machines. She communicated commands, adjusted speeds, altitude, banking angles, her focus absolute. Around her, the squadron maintained formation, trusting in her actions even though none of them fully realized her role. She was still the backup, still invisible. But right now, she was the fulcrum upon which life and death balanced. The enemy aircraft were closing in. Their engines roared across radar, fast, precise, unyielding. Emily's mind didn't waver. Every maneuver had to account for them. One misstep and the lead pilot and possibly the entire mission could be destroyed. Missiles streaked past, flares exploded in the distance, and yet she remained unnervingly calm, her eyes scanning radar, her hands dancing across controls, anticipating every threat before it became real. The wind of the desert at high altitude whipped across the cockpit, mixing with the heat of the engines and the tension in the air. Emily's breath was steady, her mind a razor. She realized that this moment, this split-second decision, would define her entire career. It was no longer about being the backup. It was about saving lives, her squadron, civilians on the ground, and the man who had always doubted her. Minutes, or was it hours, passed in a blur of motion, strategy, and instinct. Emily maneuvered Riley's jet with flawless precision, guiding it away from the imminent threat. Enemy fighters tried to intercept, weaving through the air like deadly birds of prey, but she predicted their patterns, countering every assault. Each successful maneuver brought her closer to stabilizing Riley's aircraft. Finally, with one last delicate adjustment, Riley's jet stabilized. Emily maintained position beside him, her eyes never leaving the radar. "You're steady," she said calmly. "Maintain altitude. I've got you." Riley exhaled, a sound of relief that was almost audible through the comms. I thought I was done for Carson. You saved me." Emily said nothing, focusing on the bigger picture. The enemy was still out there. The threat wasn't over. Her squadron would survive only if she remained vigilant. She turned her gaze to the horizon, scanning the skies for movement, every muscle taut with anticipation. The squadron radio buzzed with renewed energy as other pilots realized the enemy was already beginning to falter. One by one, they reported unusual hesitations among the approaching aircraft. Emily's instincts sharpened. Something was different. The enemy was reacting, not to the squadron's firepower, not to strategy, but to her. She felt a chill. Her call sign flashed on the enemy radar somewhere out there, a ghost of recognition. Somehow, the enemy knew her, known only as the backup pilot, now the one holding the mission together at 30,000 feet. Emily adjusted her jet, every movement deliberate, controlled, and almost eerily calm. She realized that this mission was no longer just a test of skill. It was psychological warfare, and the unknown pilots on the other side were already learning to fear her name. The squadron followed her lead, responding with coordinated maneuvers that seemed impossible in the chaos. She had become the axis around which the mission turned. And in that moment, Emily knew she was no longer invisible. The sky had recognized her strength, her precision, and her courage. Yet even as the immediate danger passed, a gnawing unease settled in her chest. Enemy jets had retreated temporarily, but they were still out there, waiting, watching, calculating. Emily's instincts screamed that the real battle had only just begun. As the sun began to rise over the Nevada desert, casting long shadows across the rugged terrain, Emily's thoughts were singular, focused. She had passed her first real test under fire, but the war was far from over. She had gone from backup to lifeline in a matter of minutes, but what awaited next could be far more dangerous, far more unpredictable. And somewhere out there, the enemy was learning that Emily Carson was no ordinary pilot, and the sky itself seemed to hold its breath in anticipation. Emily Carson's hands gripped the controls of her F-22 like a lifeline. The cockpit was a cocoon of precision and danger, the glass canopy vibrating with the roar of jet engines. Around her, the Nevada desert had become a blur of brown and gold beneath the high-altitude dance of fighter jets. The enemy was close, too close, and Emily's mind was running faster than the engines, calculating angles, trajectories, and possible escape routes with the speed of lightning. The moment the lead pilot had collapsed, Emily had stepped up instinctively. The squadron, stunned and uncertain, now relied entirely on her. She wasn't just the backup anymore. She was the axis around which their survival rotated. Every second counted. One miscalculation could send Riley's jet spiraling into the desert floor, or worse, leave the enemy free to strike civilians below. Emily adjusted her altitude, scanning the radar for the approaching enemy fighters. 5 fast-moving blips, sleek and deadly, were closing in from the northwest. Their movements were deliberate, coordinated, a wolf pack hunting a single prey. She knew the protocols, the maneuvers, the evasive tactics, but instinct told her this was no ordinary attack. They were testing her, probing weaknesses, reacting to her every move. Phoenix 1, a voice crackled over the squadron radio. It was the lead operator, still breathless from the chaos. Enemy formation approaching from your 6, estimated intercept in 30 seconds. Emily's pulse surged, not with fear but with absolute focus. 30 seconds. That was all she had. She banked sharply to the left, dodging an incoming missile that streaked across her path like a falling star. Flames licked the air outside the cockpit, reflected in her visor. Her squadron followed instinctively, trusting her guidance even though none of them fully understood the precision behind every command. The enemy fired again. This time, a volley of missiles cut across the sky, each one designed to destroy. Emily anticipated their angles, executing a maneuver that felt impossible. A high-speed barrel roll followed by a sudden dive into the canyon below, using the terrain as cover. Her jet shuddered under the strain, wings vibrating as the G-forces pressed her into her seat. "Carson, you're insane," Riley's voice screamed over the comms. "You'll tear the jet apart." Emily didn't respond. She couldn't afford distraction. Her eyes were fixed on the radar, on the sky, on every movement of the enemy jets. She felt them trying to anticipate her next move, and she was already 3 steps ahead. The F-22 responded flawlessly, slicing through the air like a knife, and for a brief moment, Emily felt a surge of exhilaration, a dangerous joy that only came when life and skill collided at the razor's edge. A second wave of enemy fighters appeared, this one faster, more aggressive. Emily's squadron moved into formation behind her, trusting her every maneuver. She directed them with calm precision, her voice steady even as the sky erupted in missiles, flares, and the deafening roar of engines. "Target on your left, Phoenix 1, a wingman shouted. Emily pivoted, banking sharply to engage. She fired, her jet's weapons system locking onto the enemy fighter. The missile streaked forward, hitting its mark. The enemy craft spiraled out of control, smoke trailing into the sky. Victory, fleeting and dangerous, hung in the air like a heartbeat. But the battle was far from over. Emily's radar flashed another warning. A new blip, faster, more aggressive, was converging on her squadron. This one was different, intelligent, calculated. Her stomach tightened. The enemy wasn't just attacking, they were learning, adapting, and now focusing entirely on her. She had to think bigger, move faster, anticipate more. Her mind ran through every possible strategy she had ever practiced, every evasive maneuver drilled into her through years of simulations. With a sudden surge of speed, she ascended sharply, pulling her squadron up and over a ridge of clouds. The enemy followed, predictable in their aggression, and Emily seized the advantage. Using the sun to blind them, she executed a high-G turn that left her pursuers momentarily disoriented. Her jet systems beeped warnings: temperature high, stress on wings critical, fuel dropping faster than expected. She ignored them. Survival demanded more than caution, it demanded audacity. Emily led her squadron through a series of impossible maneuvers, each one pushing the limits of the aircraft and their own bodies. She felt her muscles scream, her vision narrow under the strain of the G-forces, but her mind remained sharp, unyielding. Then an enemy fighter broke formation, diving directly toward Riley's jet. Time slowed. Emily's hands flew over the controls, weapons locking onto the attacker. She fired, the missile slicing through the sky like a silver dart. The enemy craft exploded in a flash of fire and smoke. Riley's voice came through the headset, filled with awe and disbelief. You saved me again," he gasped. Emily didn't answer. She couldn't. Another blip appeared on the radar, faster than the rest, moving with a precision that suggested intelligence far beyond ordinary pilots. Her gut told her this was the leader, the one coordinating the enemy attack. Her fingers hovered over the controls, calculating every angle, every possible approach. She realized the real challenge wasn't the numbers. It was this one pilot testing her limits. Her squadron tightened formation around her as she engaged the enemy leader. Missiles streaked past, flares lit the sky, and jets twisted and banked in a deadly ballet of speed and precision. Emily's voice remained calm, issuing instructions that her wingmen followed instinctively. Each maneuver was a gamble, each decision a test of skill, courage, and nerve. The enemy leader broke formation suddenly, diving toward a canyon. Emily followed, banking sharply, her jet straining under the force. She anticipated his moves, outmaneuvering him in a series of twists, turns, and dives that left the canyon walls rushing past in a blur. With one final, precise maneuver, she forced the enemy pilot into a stall. His jet spun out of control, smoke trailing, and crashed into the desert far below. For a brief moment, the sky went silent. Emily's squadron hovered in formation, engines humming, hearts racing. They had survived. The enemy had retreated, their formations broken, their confidence shattered. But Emily didn't relax. She knew better than anyone that the danger was far from over. The enemy wasn't just random pilots. They were organized, intelligent, and adaptive. And they had already learned something terrifying. Emily Carson was not someone to underestimate. Her hands loosened slightly on the controls, but her mind remained sharp. She scanned the horizon, eyes narrowing at distant clouds that might conceal more threats. Her heart still pounded, not from fear, but from the realization of what had just happened. She had led her squadron through impossible maneuvers, saved the lead pilot, destroyed enemy fighters, and emerged victorious, all in the first real test of her career. And yet a quiet, chilling thought settled in her chest. The enemy had recognized her. Her call sign, her reputation as the backup, had preceded her. Somewhere out there they were already plotting, already learning from this engagement, already preparing for the moment they would return. Emily's visor reflected the rising sun, golden light casting shadows across her determined face. She had been the backup pilot, the one no one believed in, the one overlooked and underestimated. And now she was the fulcrum of her squadron's survival, the edge between victory and disaster. She had survived her first real combat engagement, but she knew the sky still held challenges far greater than this. Challenges that would test her skill, her courage, and her will to survive. And somewhere beyond the horizon, the enemy was already preparing their next move, aware now that the backup pilot was no ordinary threat. The real war had only just begun. White heavy check mark. End of Part 3. Suspense hook. Emily has successfully outmaneuvered and defeated the first wave of enemy fighters, but the enemy leader recognized her skill and is already planning their next attack. The audience is left wondering, who is the enemy leader? Will Emily face an even greater threat? How far can she push herself and her squadron? The Nevada sky, once vast and serene, had transformed into a theater of chaos. Enemy jets streaked across the horizon, engines screaming like predators closing in on their prey. Emily Carson, once the invisible backup pilot, now bore the weight of command on her shoulders. Every decision she made in the next minutes could save lives or doom them all. Her squadron, still rattled from the first engagement, flew in tight formation behind her. She scanned the radar relentlessly, noting every blip, every shift in velocity. Enemy patterns were becoming more aggressive, more cunning, but Emily's mind moved faster, calculating angles and probabilities with surgical precision. This wasn't just a battle of machines. It was a battle of wits, instinct, and nerve. "Phoenix 1, you're on their 6. A wingman shouted over the comms, panic threading his voice. Emily's eyes narrowed. The approaching jets were closing in rapidly, and she realized the enemy was testing her, probing for weaknesses. Their leader's maneuvers were intelligent, almost predictive, as though someone had studied every habit, every strategy, every past mission she'd flown. But Emily had one advantage they didn't: instinct sharpened by years of overlooked training, of being underestimated, of preparing when no one was watching. She twisted her jet sharply, engines screaming as she pulled up into a vertical climb. Flares lit the sky behind her, scattering like fireflies. The enemy fired in response, missiles streaking past, missing by mere inches. Emily's heart pounded, but her mind remained razor-sharp. She guided the first wave of enemy fighters into a trap, leading them into a canyon where terrain and tactics worked in her favor. One enemy jet clipped a canyon wall, spinning out of control, smoke trailing as it plunged toward the desert floor. The first kill of the engagement sent a shockwave through her squadron. Her wingmen's voices cracked over the radio, half disbelief, half awe. You did it," one muttered, his tone reverent. Emily didn't celebrate. There was no time. Another wave of enemy fighters approached from the north, faster, more coordinated. She could sense their confidence faltering, but the danger was far from over. They were testing her squadron's limits, and she intended to push back. She adjusted her altitude, banking sharply, the G-forces pressing her into her seat. Her jet groaned under the strain, but Emily's focus was unwavering. She identified the leader's signal, the one coordinating the attack, and realized that neutralizing it would cripple the enemy formation. Every missile she fired, every maneuver she executed, was calculated to disrupt their rhythm and force hesitation. And it worked. The enemy leader's jet faltered, pulling away slightly as if caught off guard. Confusion rippled through the remaining fighters. Emily's squadron noticed the hesitation, their own confidence rising. Emily pressed the advantage, leading them in a synchronized counterattack. Missiles streaked across the sky, explosions lighting the clouds with bursts of fire and smoke. Enemy jets spiraled out of control, crashing in the distance. "Holy hell," Riley's voice came over the comms, still catching his breath. "They're breaking formation." Emily's heart surged, not with triumph but with awareness. The fight wasn't over. The enemy might be faltering, but the leader still lurked somewhere, testing, watching, waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike. Every pilot in her squadron looked to her now, their confidence tethered to her decisions. The weight of that responsibility settled heavily on her shoulders, but she welcomed it. "Maintain formation," she instructed, voice calm but commanding. "Keep eyes on all blips. No one moves alone. We've only just begun." The enemy pilots hesitated, their aggression replaced by caution. Somehow they had recognized her call sign, the one they had underestimated for so long. Phoenix 1. Emily realized with a chill that ran down her spine that she had become more than a tactical threat. They feared her. Her presence, her precision, had injected uncertainty into their ranks. Emily's mind raced. She wasn't just flying for herself or her squadron. She was shaping the battlefield, controlling the psychology of the enemy. Each maneuver, each kill was a message. This backup pilot was not to be underestimated. Suddenly, a new blip appeared on her radar, faster and closer than any before. She froze for a split second, analyzing its trajectory. This wasn't just another fighter, it was an interceptor, likely the enemy leader. Her stomach tightened. This was the moment she had anticipated, the ultimate test of her skill, instincts, and courage. "Enemy leader, 12 o'clock, descending," she said over the comms. "Prepare for engagement. Hold your positions and follow my lead." The squadron responded instantly, moving into formation around her, their trust absolute. Emily's hands danced over the controls, her mind moving faster than the eye could follow. She anticipated every possible move the leader might make, every tactic, every counter. She maneuvered her jet with the precision of a master choreographer, weaving through the sky in a deadly ballet. The enemy leader dove aggressively toward her formation, missiles streaking across the sky. Emily executed a sharp, vertical climb, dodging the incoming threat while simultaneously guiding a counterattack. Explosions lit the clouds in bursts of fire and smoke, a chaotic symphony of destruction. She targeted the leader's position, locking weapons with exacting precision. The missile launched, streaking forward like a silver arrow. Emily watched through her visor as the enemy fighter tried to evade, but the trajectory was flawless. The enemy leader's jet spun violently, smoke trailing, before it exploded in a fiery cascade over the desert. A stunned silence followed on the comms. Even her squadron was momentarily speechless. Emily allowed herself a brief exhale, though her mind was already analyzing the next potential threat. She had struck first blood, disrupted the enemy, and shattered their formation, but she knew the battle wasn't over. Her thoughts flicked to the broader picture. Enemy reinforcements were still out there, adapting to her tactics, learning her maneuvers. But for now, she had established dominance. Her name, once whispered in doubt, was now etched in fear across the enemy ranks. "Phoenix 1, one of her wingmen finally breathed over the radio, voice trembling with awe. You're unreal." Emily didn't respond. Her eyes scanned the horizon, alert for the next blip, the next threat. She had saved her squadron and decimated the first wave of enemy forces, but deep down, she knew the sky still held surprises, traps, and dangers she could not yet see. As the sun rose higher, casting golden light across the desert and the cloud-draped mountains, Emily's reflection glimmered in the cockpit glass. She had been the backup pilot, overlooked, underestimated, invisible. Now she was a force to be reckoned with, a symbol of fear to those who opposed her. And somewhere beyond the horizon, she knew the enemy was already regrouping, strategizing, and learning from their first devastating encounter. Emily's hands tightened on the controls, her eyes steely. The battle was far from over. The skis were no longer just hers to navigate. They were hers to dominate, and the enemy had no idea what was coming next. The desert sky stretched endlessly, but Emily Carson felt it closing in. Every blip on her radar was a heartbeat of danger, every movement a potential threat. Her squadron followed her with unspoken trust, their eyes on Phoenix 1, the backup pilot who had become the fulcrum of the battle. Yet amidst the adrenaline and chaos, A chill slid down her spine. The enemy knew her name. It started as a faint signal, intercepted on communications she barely had time to notice. Coded chatter, broken words, foreign voices muttering something with urgency and hesitation. Emily leaned closer to her console, adjusting filters. The words became clear. Phoenix 1. Her jaw tightened. The enemy recognized her, not as a tactical symbol, not as a generic threat, but personally, her call sign, whispered with fear across channels Emily could only partially intercept. She realized in that instant that she was no longer invisible. She had become more than a pilot. She had become a legend. And legends were dangerous, not only for their enemies but for themselves. A warning signal beeped sharply. Another wave was approaching, faster than the last. Emily's fingers flew over the controls, adjusting altitude and banking her F-22 sharply. The squadron mirrored her movements flawlessly, a symphony of jets responding to her lead. The desert stretched beneath them like a living map of shadows, ridges, and canyons that Emily used as both shield and trap. Enemy formation, 2 o'clock descending. Her wingman called, voice taut with tension. Emily pivoted sharply, narrowly avoiding a missile that screamed past her canopy. The jet groaned under the stress, wings vibrating as if warning her of the limits being pushed. But she didn't flinch. She had learned long ago that fear was a luxury pilots could not afford. Every second counted, every decision was a gamble, every maneuver a question of life or death. She led the enemy into a narrow canyon, the walls rising on either side like jagged teeth. Her squadron followed, trust absolute, as she executed a series of turns and dives designed to disorient and trap the attackers. Missiles streaked past, some intercepted by flares, others missing by inches. The first enemy jet clipped a canyon wall, smoke trailing as it spiraled out of control. Phoenix 1, they're falling apart. Riley's voice came over the comms, awestruck. Emily didn't celebrate. The enemy had adapted before. They were learning, calculating. This victory was temporary. She scanned the radar and detected a new pattern, one fast, aggressive blip moving deliberately behind the canyon walls. Her pulse quickened, not with fear but with the thrill that only real combat could bring. This was the enemy leader's hand in the fight, the strategist, the one who had sent waves before, testing her limits, now daring to challenge her directly. Her fingers hovered over the trigger, calculating trajectories, anticipating evasions. She had to end this quickly, decisively, or the next wave could overwhelm them. She adjusted her velocity, ascending sharply to gain the high ground, weapons locking onto the target. The enemy leader twisted, banking sharply, attempting to outmaneuver her. Emily countered instinctively, the jet responding like an extension of her own body. Around her, missiles streaked across the sky, a deadly ballet of destruction, and flares exploded in fiery bursts, illuminating the battle with light and smoke. "Carson, they know you're here," a comm operator whispered over the squadron feed, almost as if afraid to say it out loud. Emily's eyes narrowed. She felt the psychological weight pressing down, not only the physical demands of the jet, but the knowledge that her reputation had already spread. Somewhere in the enemy ranks, fear of her had begun to take root, affecting their tactics, slowing their decision-making, fracturing their cohesion. The realization struck her. The battle was no longer just about skill or firepower. It was about influence, about control, about making the enemy doubt themselves before she even fired a shot. Her mind raced, shifting strategy from simple engagement to a game of psychological dominance. Every maneuver she made, every decision she issued over the squadron radio became a message. Phoenix 1 was in command, and the enemy could not predict her. The enemy leader dived aggressively toward Riley's jet, the intent clear: eliminate the weakened target. Emily's reflexes snapped into action. With a sharp pull on the throttle and a roll of the wings, she intercepted the dive, weapons locking. The missile launched with precision, slicing through the sky like a silver dart, catching the enemy off guard. The lead jet spiraled violently, smoke trailing, crashing into the desert below. For a moment the battlefield went eerily silent. Emily's squadron hovered in formation, engines humming, tension palpable. Her eyes scanned the horizon, every sense attuned to movement. The enemy had faltered once more, but Emily knew better than to let her guard down. They were still out there, regrouping, recalculating, learning from every failure. She turned her gaze to the distant cloud line where additional blips appeared. Another wave, faster, more coordinated. Emily's lips pressed into a thin line. The enemy had learned fear, but they had also learned strategy. They would not make the same mistakes again. This next engagement would test her not only as a pilot but as a leader. Her wingmen's voices crackled over the radio, full of awe and tension. "Phoenix 1, they're afraid of you." Emily didn't reply. Fear was a tool and she intended to use it. She guided her squadron with calculated precision, using terrain, velocity, and psychological leverage to control the battlefield. Each maneuver was deliberate, each decision weighted with consequence. Missiles streaked past, some intercepted, some dodged, and explosions painted the sky with fiery streaks. She realized in a moment of grim clarity that her reputation was now a weapon. The name Phoenix 1, once a simple call sign, was now a symbol of inevitability, precision, and fear. The enemy reacted not to the jets themselves but to the pilot behind them. Her mere presence on the radar altered their tactics, slowed their aggression, and caused hesitation. And that hesitation, Emily knew, could be exploited. She executed a sharp dive through a narrow canyon, leading enemy fighters into a trap of her own design. Her squadron followed, trust absolute, moving as one through the deadly maze. Missiles streaked past, but Emily anticipated each one. She fired selectively, her precision unparalleled, taking down one enemy jet after another. Smoke trailed across the desert as the attackers faltered, their formations breaking under her control. For the first time, Emily allowed herself a small, controlled breath. She had taken the first steps toward absolute dominance in the sky, not just physically but psychologically. Her squadron had survived, and the enemy had learned fear. Yet even in victory, her instincts warned her. The battle was far from over. Somewhere beyond the horizon, the enemy was already regrouping, adapting, and planning their next move. Emily's pulse quickened, not with fear, but with the knowledge that the true test lay ahead. She adjusted her controls, her mind sharp and unwavering. The enemy might fear her, but fear alone wouldn't stop them. Every second, every maneuver, every calculated risk would define the survival of her squadron, the success of the mission, and the very legend of Phoenix 1. And somewhere, deep in enemy territory, whispers of her name spread, a shadow of dread across the ranks. The backup pilot who had become the nightmare of their skis. Emily Carson's F-22 sliced through the sky like a phantom, engines roaring as she led her squadron deeper into hostile territory. The desert below had vanished behind clouds, replaced by jagged mountains, valleys, and the hazy silhouettes of enemy bases she had only seen in intelligence reports. Every movement was calculated, deliberate. One wrong decision here, one misjudged turn, and the entire mission could end in disaster. Yet Emily's calm remained unshaken, her mind racing through possibilities faster than any human eye could track. Her squadron trusted her implicitly, their faith anchored in the precision and courage she had demonstrated throughout the mission. Emily wasn't just leading, they were surviving under her guidance. Her call sign, Phoenix 1, had become more than a label. It was a symbol of deadly precision. She could sense the enemy's fear radiating through the channels she monitored. Somewhere, deep in enemy territory, they whispered her name with dread, adjusting tactics in real time to counter her influence. "Phoenix 1, Riley's voice broke the tense silence over the comms. "We're approaching the target coordinates. Intelligence confirms multiple high-value assets on the ground. Civilians may be in proximity." Emily's pulse tightened. The mission's stakes had shifted. She had already decimated the enemy fighters in the air, but now the ground targets required surgical precision. One misstep could trigger catastrophic collateral damage. Her squadron looked to her for guidance, knowing that the next maneuvers would determine success or annihilation. Her eyes scanned the radar. Enemy anti-aircraft defenses had already noticed the intruders and were activating. Missile batteries lit up the screen, targeting her squadron with deadly intent. Emily's hands moved instinctively, flipping switches, guiding her jets through a complex web of fire and flares. Each maneuver was a calculated risk, designed to minimize exposure while maintaining speed toward the primary objective. Elevation 35,000, maintain tight formation, she ordered. Engage evasive maneuvers on my mark. Wait for my signal. The squadron followed flawlessly. Emily's heart pounded, but her face remained composed beneath the visor. Each second stretched into an eternity as enemy missiles streaked past, narrowly missing their marks. The sky erupted in explosions, clouds illuminated in bursts of fire. Emily guided Riley and the others through a series of high-speed barrel rolls and vertical climbs that pushed both pilots and aircraft to their limits. Then she spotted it, the enemy command ship coordinating the ground assets, a sprawling facility bristling with radar dishes, missile batteries, and anti-aircraft weaponry. Taking it out would cripple the enemy's operations, but the approach was a gauntlet. Each ridge, each canyon, each hidden battery represented death waiting to strike. Emily's mind mapped the safest path, the sequence of maneuvers, and the angles of attack in a fraction of a second. Phoenix 1, the defenses are intense. We'll lose jets if we push through, Riley warned, sweat gleaming on his forehead. Emily's lips pressed into a thin line. No choice. The mission requires precision. Follow my lead exactly. One misstep and we lose everything. But if we succeed, the enemy loses command and coordination. We've trained for this. Her squadron adjusted formation, engines screaming as they followed her into the heart of enemy territory. The anti-aircraft fire intensified, missiles streaking from hidden bunkers, their trajectory deadly and precise. Emily's hands danced across the controls, pulling high-G maneuvers, adjusting altitude and speed, her eyes scanning the radar, anticipating every incoming threat. She felt the stress of every jet around her, the lives of her squadron mates tethered to her decisions. Each split-second calculation could save or destroy them. Sweat ran down her temples, yet her mind remained razor-sharp. The sky was chaos incarnate, but she controlled it with unyielding precision. As they neared the command ship, Emily made the first move. She executed a sharp dive toward the target, drawing enemy fire while maintaining a path that minimized risk to the squadron. Riley followed, her wingmen trailing like shadows, every maneuver synchronized. Explosions lit the facility below, anti-aircraft fire shredding the air around them. Emily's fingers flew over controls, guiding missiles to their targets, timing detonations with surgical accuracy. The facility erupted in flames, radar towers collapsing, missile batteries detonating in a chain reaction. Enemy coordination crumbled, communications jammed, and chaos spread across the battlefield. Emily's squadron responded flawlessly, pressing the advantage, while the remaining enemy fighters hesitated, confused, cautious, fearful. They had learned something. Phoenix 1 was not just capable, she was lethal, unyielding, and unpredictable. But the danger wasn't over. Emily scanned the skis and radar again. A high-speed interceptor, the enemy's final line of defense, was converging on their position. Its trajectory was calculated, almost prescient. Emily's chest tightened, not with fear but with awareness. This was the true test, facing a fighter designed to counter her, tracking her movements, anticipating her every decision. She leaned forward in the cockpit, voice calm and commanding. Maintain formation. This is our final wave. Focus. Follow my lead. Engage only on my signal. The interceptor dove aggressively, missiles launched in perfect coordination. Emily twisted her jet into an impossible maneuver, a vertical climb followed by a sharp barrel roll, dodging missiles with precise timing. Her squadron mirrored her movements flawlessly, a deadly formation of trust and skill. Emily targeted the interceptor, calculating the perfect angle. She fired, the missile streaking through the sky, catching the enemy off guard. The enemy craft spiraled, smoke trailing before it crashed into the desert below, leaving a streak of fire across the horizon. For a brief, fragile moment, the battlefield went silent. Her squadron hovered in formation, engines humming, tension palpable. Emily's visor reflected the rising sun, the golden light casting her determined face in stark relief. She had led her team through the enemy's defenses, destroyed a critical command facility, and eliminated the final interceptor. Yet she knew this was only a temporary victory. The enemy had learned. They had witnessed her skill firsthand, recognized her name, and now feared her presence. Every future engagement would be colored by the legend she had become in a single, high-stakes battle. Her fingers released the controls slightly, allowing the jet to stabilize. She exhaled, though her mind remained sharp, scanning the horizon for potential threats. Emily had gone from the overlooked backup pilot to the strategist, the lifeline, the force that held her squadron together. "Phoenix 1, we did it," Riley whispered over the comms, awe in his voice. Emily's eyes didn't leave the sky. "For now," she said softly, "but the enemy isn't done. They're already regrouping, and next time they'll be more dangerous." Her squadron followed her lead, engines roaring as they moved away from the ruined enemy command facility. The desert stretched beneath them, bathed in the first light of day, but Emily's thoughts were already ahead, calculating the enemy's next moves, anticipating the battles yet to come. Somewhere beyond the horizon in enemy territory, whispers spread. Phoenix 1 was no ordinary pilot. She had outsmarted, outmaneuvered, and outgunned them. Her name was now a symbol of fear, and fear, Emily knew, could be as deadly as any missile. The skis had been won today, but the war was far from over. And Emily Carson, once overlooked and dismissed, was ready for whatever came next. The desert stretched endlessly beneath the squadron, a vast canvas of sand, rock, and shadow. But for Emily Carson, the real battlefield was above, the endless expanse of sky where speed, instinct, and courage collided. Her F-22 cut through the clouds, engines roaring, wings slicing the wind. She had led her squadron deep into enemy territory, destroyed their command facility, and survived waves of elite fighters. Yet even in the fleeting calm, Emily sensed the tension lingering in the air. Something had changed. She glanced at the radar, noting the enemy's scattered remnants. Their formations were broken, their coordination faltering. More significantly, the intercepted communications revealed the whispers she had anticipated. Every voice, every channel, repeated the same words with an undercurrent of fear. "Phoenix 1, Phoenix 1." Emily's jaw tightened. They weren't just reacting, they were terrified. Her reputation had preceded her, transforming a single pilot into a phantom, a shadow of dread across enemy lines. The realization was powerful. The enemy no longer fought blindly. Every maneuver, every decision was now influenced by the legend she had become in just a few hours of combat. Her mind shifted gears. Fear could be weaponized, and she intended to wield it. Each maneuver she executed, each tactical decision she made, would shape the enemy's reactions, forcing them into hesitation, mistakes, and predictable patterns. Her squadron responded flawlessly, their trust absolute, following her lead without question. "Phoenix 1, Riley said over the comms, voice tight with adrenaline. They're terrified of you. Every squadron we encounter is reacting before we even fire." Emily didn't answer. She didn't need to. The radar and sky told her everything. Enemy pilots were behaving differently, slower, less coordinated, cautious where they once would have been aggressive. They were learning fear, responding to a name they had never encountered outside of intercepted intelligence. Her focus sharpened. She adjusted her altitude, banking sharply to maintain position above the mountain range ahead. Enemy radar had detected their presence and reinforcements were inbound. Jets appeared on her screen, faster, more coordinated than before, likely the most elite units the enemy had kept in reserve. These were pilots who had studied American tactics, pilots trained to exploit hesitation. And yet, even they were faltering, aware of her presence. Emily inhaled sharply. This was the moment she had anticipated, not just a test of skill, but a test of psychological dominance. The enemy feared her, yes, but could she push that fear to break them entirely? She needed to consolidate her advantage, turn dread into control, and force them into mistakes she could exploit. Squadron, maintain tight formation. Let them come to us. Watch their movements. Anticipate every maneuver, she ordered calmly. They're reacting to us and specifically to me. We use that to our advantage. The first wave of reinforcements dove aggressively from above, missiles streaking across the sky in deadly arcs. Emily adjusted her trajectory, banking sharply, letting gravity and speed work in her favor. Missiles streaked past, detonating harmlessly in clouds of fire. She directed her squadron with surgical precision, guiding them into counterattacks that dismantled the incoming assault before it could gain momentum. The enemy leader, a new, faster pilot, attempted to flank her. Emily anticipated the move, executing a sudden vertical climb followed by a tight corkscrew descent. Her jet groaned under the stress, wings straining, engines screaming, but her squadron followed flawlessly. The enemy leader misjudged her movement, overcorrecting, and was forced into evasive maneuvers that left him exposed. Emily fired, missiles locking onto the target. Flames licked across the sky as the enemy craft spiraled downward, smoke trailing. One by one, the remaining enemy jets faltered, confusion and fear spreading like wildfire. They had underestimated her, and now their hesitation was her weapon. Phoenix 1, a broken voice repeated over intercepted comms, trembling. We ka. Emily allowed herself a moment to absorb the power of the realization. Her presence was now a weapon beyond firepower. The enemy responded to her name with terror, and that terror translated into mistakes, openings, and vulnerabilities. Every pilot she faced now second-guessed decisions, miscalculated angles, or hesitated, giving her squadron the advantage. But Emily didn't relent. She pushed further, guiding her team deeper into the chaos. High above enemy territory, she orchestrated maneuvers that seemed almost choreographed, forcing jets into traps, exploiting terrain, and timing attacks with deadly accuracy. Explosions erupted below as missiles found their marks, anti-aircraft batteries were neutralized, and enemy formations collapsed under pressure. Yet even amidst success, her instincts screamed warnings. The enemy was far from defeated. They were learning, adapting, and calculating. The fear of Phoenix 1 was only the first step. Soon, they would develop countermeasures, tactics, and strategies specifically designed to challenge her dominance. The question was not whether they would strike again, but when, and with what force. Emily adjusted her throttle, climbing to higher altitude. She needed to maintain the initiative, keep the enemy off balance, and ensure her squadron's survival. Every movement now was psychological warfare as much as physical maneuvering. Her jet, her skill, her presence, all weapons in a high-stakes game of aerial chess. Squadron, eyes on all blips. They're trying to regroup, but we dictate the tempo. Remember, we are in control. Fear is ours to wield, she instructed, voice steady, commanding. Her squadron followed, executing each maneuver with precision and trust. Emily's mind raced, analyzing patterns, predicting the enemy's next moves, calculating every angle, every trajectory, every potential outcome. Missiles screamed past, flares burst in brilliant arcs, and the sky became a canvas of chaos and strategy. And yet the whispers continued. Through intercepted comms, the same words repeated. Phoenix 1, Phoenix 1, her legend was spreading. Her presence had become an omen, her call sign a signal of impending doom for anyone who opposed her. Emily knew this was only the beginning. The enemy's fear was a fragile weapon, one that could shatter with a single miscalculation. She had to maintain focus, push her team to the edge, and exploit every hesitation. Victory depended not only on skill but on psychological dominance, and she intended to wield both with unmatched precision. Somewhere beyond the horizon, enemy strategists were scrambling. They had underestimated the backup pilot. They had not anticipated a leader who could inspire terror with skill alone, and they were already recalculating, already preparing for the next confrontation. Emily's F-22 soared higher, engine screaming, wings slicing through clouds, as she guided her squadron into the next phase of battle. She had become more than a pilot, she was a force, a legend, and a nightmare. The sky itself seemed to recognize her dominance, bending under her will as she prepared for what would come next. And as the enemy whispered her name in fear, Emily Carson knew that the final act of this aerial war was drawing near, and that the next move would decide not just the battle, but the legacy of Phoenix 1. The sky above the Nevada desert had become a theater of fire, speed, and instinct. Emily Carson's F-22 sliced through clouds, engines screaming in perfect harmony with her heartbeat. She had led her squadron deep into enemy territory, destroyed critical command facilities, neutralized elite fighters, and turned fear itself into a weapon. And yet, as the radar lit up with multiple incoming blips, she knew the final confrontation had arrived. This wasn't a standard wave. These were the enemy's best, veteran pilots, each one trained to counter her moves, to anticipate her strategies, to exploit even the smallest hesitation. And for the first time, Emily sensed the stakes had escalated beyond survival. This battle would define her legend. The sky wasn't just a battlefield, it was the proving ground of Phoenix 1. Phoenix 1, Riley's voice cut through the comms, taut with tension. We've got at least a dozen inbound. They're coordinating like never before. Emily's jaw tightened. Dozen or not, they were reacting to her, adjusting every move with fear at the back of their minds. She didn't speak, didn't need to. Her focus sharpened to a point. Every movement, every decision would determine the outcome. She adjusted her altitude, banking sharply, drawing the squadron into formation behind her. The enemy, confident and aggressive, dove toward them in unison, their missiles cutting the sky with deadly arcs. Emily anticipated each trajectory, leading her team through a series of maneuvers so precise they bordered on the impossible. Her jet groaned, wings vibrating under stress, engines roaring as if mirroring her resolve. Hold formation, trust me, Emily commanded, voice calm but commanding. Missiles streaked past, flares exploded in fiery arcs, and the first of the enemy jets faltered under her counterattack. Emily fired selectively, each missile a scalpel, eliminating targets with deadly accuracy. Smoke trailed across the sky as enemy formations fractured. Fear had become an ally, and the enemy pilot's hesitation played directly into her hands. But then the final threat appeared, the ace, the one the enemy had reserved for this moment. Faster than anything Emily had faced, this pilot moved with lethal precision, locking onto her squadron. Emily recognized the style immediately, an elite tactician, calculating every angle, every move, every opportunity. He was dangerous, and he knew her reputation. Her pulse quickened, not from fear but anticipation. This was the ultimate test. The sky above the desert became a cage, mountains rising below and clouds stretching above, while two forces of nature prepared to collide. The enemy ace dove, weaving aggressively, missiles fired with deadly intent. Emily responded instantly, twisting her jet in a high-G roll, narrowly avoiding destruction. Her squadron mirrored her movements, keeping close and trusting every decision she made. Every second was a duel of skill, instinct, and nerve. Emily's mind raced. She had to end this decisively. The ace was calculating, but he was also reacting to her presence, her reputation, her call sign. Phoenix 1 had become more than a pilot. She had become a force, a shadow that disrupted even the most elite minds. She had learned to weaponize fear, and now she would use it to finish this fight. She feinted left, baiting the ace into a high-speed dive through a narrow canyon. Her squadron followed, missiles streaking past, explosions illuminating the rocks with sudden, violent light. The enemy ace misjudged the turn, slightly overcompensating. Emily seized the opening. With surgical precision, she launched a missile, the guidance system locking onto the enemy craft. Time seemed to stretch as the target spiraled, smoke trailing, and then impact. A blinding explosion erupted across the canyon, debris scattering into the sky. The ace was down. For a heartbeat, silence reigned. Emily hovered in formation, heart pounding, eyes scanning for any remaining threats. The enemy squadron, leaderless and disoriented, began to break apart. Fear, now compounded by chaos, rippled through their ranks. Every pilot knew they had underestimated her, and that miscalculation had cost them everything. Riley's voice came through, disbelief and awe in his tone. She did it. Phoenix 1, you did it. Emily didn't respond. Victory wasn't about celebration. It was about survival, precision, and legacy. She guided her squadron away from the wreckage, ascending to higher altitude, engines roaring, her eyes scanning every blip, every movement. There would always be threats, but for now, she had achieved something extraordinary. The radio chatter was almost surreal. Enemy communications were fractured, panicked, and broken. Her name, once whispered, now echoed through their channels as a warning, a harbinger of defeat. Phoenix 1 was no longer just a call sign. It was a legend. A single pilot who had transformed a squadron into a force capable of annihilating elite enemy units. Emily allowed herself a brief exhale, the first since the battle had begun. She looked over at Riley, who gave her a small, awed nod. The squadron had survived intact, the enemy decimated, and their mission complete. The impossible had been accomplished. Yet even in the calm, Emily remained vigilant. She had learned that warfare was not just about victories. It was about preparation, adaptability, and the understanding that danger could appear when least expected. She had led, she had fought, and she had proven herself. But the sky was vast, unpredictable, and relentless. Her reflection gleamed in the cockpit glass, golden light from the setting sun illuminating her determined features. She thought of every moment, the collapse of the lead pilot, the impossible maneuvers, the relentless waves of enemy fighters, the ace who had tested her limits. Every trial had forged her into the pilot she was now, Phoenix 1. And somewhere, deep within enemy territory, whispers of her name spread like wildfire. Fear had become her weapon, precision her shield, and courage her fuel. No enemy pilot would face her without hesitation. No squadron would underestimate her again. As the desert stretched below in a patchwork of shadows and light, Emily Carson guided her squadron back toward friendly airspace. The battle was over, but the story of Phoenix 1 had just begun. She had transformed from a backup pilot, overlooked and underestimated, into a force whose name alone could inspire dread and awe across the battlefield. Her eyes scanned the horizon, clouds parting in the golden glow of sunset. The sky was hers, not because of machines or missiles, but because of skill, courage, and unyielding determination. Phoenix 1 had risen, not merely to survive, but to command, to dominate, and to leave a legacy that would echo across the skies for years to come. And as Emily Carson's jet soared above the desert, engines screaming into the twilight, one truth resonated in every comm channel, every whisper among enemy pilots. The backup pilot was gone, Phoenix 1 was eternal,